afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's Mashreq Sustainability Dialogues podcast, where we take a deeper dive into this massive push towards sustainability that we're seeing, of course, across the region as well as around the world, trying to uncover some insights and intelligence that will help our stakeholders out on the journey ahead. We're in a situation right now, too, where I think it's less than 100 days to COP28, very much solution stock take oriented focused, of course, which our topic is touching on today, which is pathways to COP28. How can we achieve both sustainable mobility and a just transition? We're joined here today with our host from Mashreq, Badar Chowdhury, head of energy sector for Mashreq, and as well as our special guest speakers, Paul Chebl, who is the vice president of strategy and sustainability for Africa, Middle East, and Central Asia at Alstom, Kevin Chalhoub, who is the CEO and founder of EV Lab, and Alaa Abusiam, who is the CEO of Middle East for Egis. Thank you all for joining the show. Badr, I just wanted to bring you in as host. Of course, this is a big topic. There's a lot of momentum heading into COP28. I just wanted to get your opening comments to start us off for the podcast.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the audience and our guest speakers. On behalf of Mashreq, we're delighted to have you join this podcast. As mentioned, I think in the sort of lead up to COP28, there are a number of industry verticals which will always have the significance or will gain sort of attract a lot of eyes in terms of what are the developments happening with respect to the energy transition. Mobility, I think, is one of those which has had a good start, at least in some markets for sure. But I think it promises to be one of those leading sectors which can sort of adopt towards the sustainable energy or sustainable transition. I think it's like any sector, the most important consideration at this stage is that the transition is not disproportionately burdening marginalized communities. It creates equalities for all the sort of economies of the region, and in terms of infrastructure investment, the opportunities are available across the economies. So as one of the oldest privately owned banks in UAE, we foresee that there will be significant investments in the sustainable mobility for the region. Mashreq, as one of the leading financial institutions of the market, has already committed to finance sustainable financing of approximately 30 billion by 2030, and we believe that a fair size of this commitment will go towards sustainable mobility.
Thank you very much for your comments, Badr. Paul, I just wanted to first kick off with you. As Badr mentioned, there's a massive amount of opportunity heading in towards this transition towards more sustainable mobility. But of course, there's a balance. There's challenges on the road ahead. I just want to start with you with your opening comments on the overall topic.
Thank you so much for hosting us. So, as you mentioned, this is a really important topic as we head towards COP28 and in general. I think Badr mentioned that mobility is a critical sector. If you think about emissions globally, about 25% are coming from mobility. So decarbonizing the mobility sector is critical, right? And it's a combination of the right investments, the right innovation, the right access that we can provide. Ultimately, us at Alstom being one of the global leader in the rail sector, we do have a wide spectrum of solutions that are environmentally friendly, and we continuously try to invest and innovate to improve the efficiency of our solution. And maybe one quick comment around kind of accessibility and equity in terms of what role do we have to play in terms of creating that access to mobility, right? So we see mobility as an enabler for economic development. So always the balance of not burdening developing economy with sustainability goals and preventing them from reaching their economic development goals. That's a critical part that we always keep in mind. And partnering with the likes of Mashreq and other reputable banks to bring the financing to allow developing countries to be able to invest and achieve their goals. That's a bit kind of where we are focusing these days.
And just to follow up to that, how do you find that balance of not burdening, progress with innovation? I imagine innovation is very much a sprint, especially in mobility. We see everything from drones to AI to trains that are being produced, that rapid, transport at the end of the day. How do you make that balance and then still make sure that we're hitting our sustainable development goals?
Absolutely. So in reality, yes, there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of new technology that we're seeing, but ultimately one of the shortest paths to decarbonization is moving from individual motorization towards shared mobility, and specifically on rail. If you compare rail to other modes of transport, it's about 10 to 12 times more efficient in terms of energy consumption, and it emits 5 to 10 times less CO2. So just by making not, the leapfrog to the latest technology, just by moving from individual motorization and putting in place either urban mobility, trams, metros, monorails, or, suburban rail, that's one step which is at the, if you want, accessible to all, economies and countries from a technology point of view. This is one way to start that journey towards decarbonization.
Kevin, I just wanted to bring you in for your opening comments. Of course, there's rail, but also EVs, the take-up of EVs, and the accessibility of that segment as well. I just want to get your overall opening comments on the theme that we're tackling today.
Just building on what Paul says, especially around emissions. I mean, it's important to know, transportation and electricity are the two most emitting sectors in our world. So 50% of the emissions are coming from those two sectors. 25, about half and half. I think electricity has a bit more emissions. The good news is the solutions are here and they are accessible, both in electric cars and renewable energy. So really, this COP, I think, is really going to be focused about solutions. We all know the problems and potential problems that could arise, and what's exciting is that the UAE is really one of those countries that is so forward-looking and is the first foreign direct investor in renewable energy projects worldwide, actually, more than any other nation. And it's a very solution-driven country. So yeah, in terms of transportation and electric cars in general, they're becoming more and more accessible. As we speak, economies of scale are growing. There's a lot of production of electric cars. It's no longer just Tesla. There's so many brands. I just went to visit a couple in Asia, a couple in Europe as well, and it's so exciting. And it's constantly about battery progress, creating more range, more performance, and that's also developing fast. But the exciting news is that the UAE is one of the countries that could adopt EVs the fastest, especially given that we don't have that long distances to drive compared to other markets. So, the longest distance, at least within the country, most people would be to go to Abu Dhabi and back. If you need to go further, you can always recharge, find charging spots. And we're one of the nations with the biggest density of chargers for electric cars on the road. So it's great to note that. So I'm very excited for the COP that's coming up.
In terms of scaling up, scaling up of economies, scaling up of technologies, energy sector, we've seen this with carbon capture, for example. It's a technology that's been there for a while and still has some scaling up to do at the moment. From your perspective, when it comes to EVs, adoption and scaling up those batteries, where do you see the challenges at the moment? What do you think can be done to help accelerate that process?
Yeah, I think we need more volume, whether it's hydrogen trains, hydrogen cars, or electric cars, battery electric cars, because technically hydrogen are also electric. But yeah, so it's about scale. As scale grows, demand, there's already more demand than supply in most countries. So I'm really not worried about that point.
Oh, I just want to bring you in there as well. Of course, scaling up is a key aspect to achieve both sustainable mobility and a just transition. I just want to get your opening comments on the overall theme.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for having us, and thanks to our hosts and the audience following us today. I think this is a very interesting time to be in the Middle East in particular, having two back-to-back COPs in the region, and an opportunity really to showcase how we're going to promote growth, but at the same time be able to decouple this growth from negative impact on the environment. And mobility in the Middle East has been sort of lagging behind when it comes to implementation in the region, although we see some pioneering cities moving in the right direction. But if you compare us to cities who've advanced elsewhere, we still rely 90% of our trips on cars. Public transport is still on the back foot when it comes to utilization and ridership. So there is a lot to be done in terms of what's our role as innovators, as engineers, to support putting a framework and policies that promote action on sustainable mobility. Like Kevin said, a lot of the technologies already exist. A lot of the initiatives around upgrading of public transport, electrification, shared mobility, and micromobility, and designing new cities is in place, but taking it to a bigger scale through moving from static traffic systems to more dynamic, bi-directional static systems, maybe approaching things around open data principles, allowing startups to innovate while protecting local data privacy, of course. So there is a lot to be implemented, and it remains a very exciting space for the new generation, because you combine engineering and technology with sustainability KPIs with digital, and you have everything that really excites new engineers and the pipeline of talent and human capital. So it's a very exciting space that aligns very well with our purpose, even as a firm in Egis, being in the Middle East for the last 30 years or so.
Just as a follow-up, what would you say are the next steps to get to implementation? So we've had visions, we've had announcements. COP28 is a point in time, but even further beyond 2030, 2050. What next steps do you think industry can do to help accelerate that implementation to reach these ambitious climate targets that have been set?
Yeah, I mean, I can probably summarize the next steps probably in four main pillars. If we talk about infrastructure in itself, the legacy infrastructure is all geared around vehicles and privately owned cars. So governments have been moving in that direction, where infrastructure, especially as we see mega new cities, mega projects, and very important developers, either in UAE, in Saudi, in Egypt, and elsewhere, adapting this new infrastructure for EVs and new strategies around autonomous vehicles and so on, but still to be seen how much of the total investment will go into that direction. The second pillar, I would say, technology. We need to deal with this as, there's an imminent threat in terms of how much we can, or the planet can tolerate, and deal with it with that mindset in terms of adapting technology and really sort of, like we responded to COVID, when we fast track technology and implementation. The third one, I would say policies, and obviously this requires behavioral change in many ways to change how we actually move from one place to another. So putting the incentives in place in terms of people-focused policies that enhance new modes or new behaviors. And then the last one, which is very important to talk about, is the funding. Where is it all going to come from? The sort of cost sharing and sharing of risks and benefits across all and climate financing instruments and the access to those. So a combination of these four things in implementation, I think, will get us moving in the right direction.
Paul, I just wanted to come back to you on that. Of course, COP28 is the global stock take. Everyone is looking at implementation, some points on the board as we head into this one big moment again in time. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, based off what Alaa said and what you think are the specific strategies that need to be implemented now in order to accelerate that next step, moving away from the visions more into blueprints and implementation.
Yeah. So I think Alaa covered obviously the main factors. For us, policies are very important. We are in a country where we're still young nations in the region, and our development was geared towards individual transport in the past. We're seeing a lot of, to be fair, we're seeing a lot of projects see life, right? I mean, if you think about what's happening in KSA, for instance, Riyadh Metro, one of the largest metros, to be developed at once. Is seeing the light now. A lot of movement in the UAE with Etihad Rail. So there is movement, and there are projects seeing light. What I would add to Alaa is a bit of a partnerships and collaboration. In a sense, how do we really it links to funding, but ultimately, how do we create these partnerships that are sustainable for private sector to come in and actually play? Because ultimately, as a private sector, it needs to make financial sense, right? So, and these mega infrastructure projects are typically not the most profitable. So, what kind of partnership, what kind of different funding mechanism can we unlock to be able to accelerate this? And lastly, is I think as consumers, we need to play a bigger role in terms of really asking for these solutions, right? You see a bit of a mindset. Younger generation are much more, focused on sustainability and their own footprint. So how do we really activate that segment of the population to push, decision makers to fast track and implement a lot of these projects?
Just on that financing aspect as well, what role does transparency, reporting, understanding the metrics of impact for investment play in these mega projects? Where do you see that at its current stage, and what role do you think it would play in order to draw in more investment?
Look, when it comes to kind of metrics and KPIs, I think we're always focused on financial metrics. I think to unlock some of the thinking is, transport and rail specifically, as I mentioned, is more of an economic enabler, right? So can we look at really the development and the acceleration of development that these projects are going to drive, especially when you have other competing industries that also are asking for funding. So once you start looking at a broader picture and a more holistic view of what is the real impact, and not specifically only on the financial implication, I think you start seeing a lot of the funding getting unlocked. And banks, as Badr at the beginning mentioned, they're now also focused a lot on sustainable financing and green financing, and that will work. Recently, rail has been included as part of the sectors and products that are eligible for this kind of financing. So we think that will also help, accelerating access to these funds.
Kevin, I just wanted to bring you in on that aspect as well. Of course, as an entrepreneur, founder of EV Lab, very much involved in the SME space as well. What are your thoughts on the partnerships and collaboration aspects of driving this forward, and also in terms of developing those partnerships to draw in further investment and then allow more exposure for sustainable mobility companies like yourself?
I think impact investing is becoming really an important topic nowadays. So anyone that's looking for investments is increasingly looking to also make an impact, a positive impact with that investment, whatever that may be. So you know, in the world of startups, you go through venture capital processes, but there's increasing amounts of venture capital that are looking at clean tech as a funding opportunity, and that's exciting for startups out there. Also, like EVLab, there is also a lot of funding for more classical types of funding for renewable energy projects out there. Yeah, I think that the biggest thing and a big discussion both at the UN in September at COP is how to align the financial incentives and the environmental one. And broader than that, what is good for us and how can we finance these things? So as long as there's alignment, and we can talk about carbon taxes, we can talk a bit about or even I'm more of the opinion you can positively reward people that act towards renewables. So rather than doing taxes. But I do think it's important to focus on aligning these incentives.
I just also wanted to touch on a point that Paul made, is the role that we as consumers play in this transition. Obviously, education plays a big part of that. What is your perspective from that aspect? How do we educate in this aspect of sustainability in order to accelerate where we want to be?
Absolutely. I mean, education is key in everyone's mission. For us at EVLab, for example, you know, that's what we're here for, to help people choose the best product for them. There's a lot of factors when considering buying or leasing an EV. What's the range? How much? How fast does it accelerate? How sustainable is it? Is it really better than combustion engine? Is it better than hydrogen or less emitting than hydrogen cars? All those questions we're here to answer. How do you charge? How fast do you charge? So education in each aspect is important. What's exciting about electric cars is that we truly believe that they're products that are not just better for the environment, but also simply better quality, safer, more reliable. And so they're a no-brainer. We're going to see a the industry is going to grow very fast. That's what and it's an exciting time for the automotive industry.
Alaa, I just want to bring you in as well. In order to do this, we have education of consumers, but also talent, the need to educate that next generation for sustainability capital, which we have a lot of conversations around the region, of course, and it seems like talent in sustainability, of course, is in high demand, but it's a struggle getting there at the moment. What are the next steps in order to achieve that, and where do you see things currently in the region in terms of advancing that space?
Yeah, I think this is you touched on a very important subject, because that's what we need to fuel, in addition, obviously, to financing, is the people to execute. And, you know, the private sector here, we all have a big role to play in terms of training and knowledge transfer, especially of being in the Middle East with the long-term visions, with the young population, and with the really keen attitude towards localization of resources. So by combining, bringing the talent, the experts from all around the world, in combination with promoting and training and the local population in the different countries in the Middle East, I think we can go a long way in terms of providing for this future requirement. But also, I think looking at this subject, and what's really interesting is that this is an economic driver. The sustainable mobility could be an economic driver by itself in terms of employment and job security. Because you know, there was a recent study by PwC that suggested The GCC alone could unlock more than $400 billion worth of economic value by investing in sustainable mobility. More than 100 billion could be just avoiding spending more money on roads and bridges and tunnels if you divert that into rail networks and public transport. If you can improve the road safety and accidents and the consequences of that. To what extent you can increase productivity. People can get things done when they are on public transport as opposed to being stuck in traffic like we see in many of our cities still. In addition to the impact of reducing emissions and what you achieve in terms of energy efficiency if you electrify your fleet and so on. So all of this, requires the talent to be part of this journey. And from a job security perspective, this gives them the path. As long as together governments and private sector get together and put the required training programs and create those paths for younger generations.
And what specific skill sets are we looking for? We're training for paths. Sustainability, for example, I had a conversation with the CSO of a fashion company the other day that was head of sustainability for a mining company in their history. So it kind of seems like there's a path towards it, but sustainability is always evolving. What specific skill sets do you see will be most in demand for the labor market for that next generation?
Yeah, look, I think from a technical point of view, there is significant requirement with the amount of data generated from the different mobility modes for data science and machine learning and AI-driven applications. So that's going to be with us for many years to come. Sustainability in itself, but specialized sustainability. You talk about energy modeling. You talk about at the master plan level, a city level, and then down to the asset level and the different planning routes as well. So there is a lot to be looked at technically, but also, I think also there is still a lot of training required around the ability to be creative or finding the creativity spark in pools of graduates that will maybe find or create models that we don't even think about today. And how do we identify and nurture that entrepreneurial spirit that combined with the technical skills could lead us towards an improved position from where we are today.
Paul, I just wanted to bring you in as well on that topic. Again, upskilling, developing that sustainability talent. I imagine as a massive organization driving the lead in sustainable mobility, it starts internally and works outward. Where do you see where we're at right now? And again, what do you think are the specific strategies that need to be implemented to accelerate that aspect in terms of human talent and capital?
Yeah. So internally, I'll start with internally. I think beyond just the talent, we'll get to that, but there's also a bit of a culture and mindset that we need to bring from an organization point of view, where kind of sustainability is part of our DNA. So when you say which talent, I would argue it goes across the entire organization. Everyone has a role. Even if I think about finance, how are we accounting for gains in sustainability? How are we tracking? What kind of metrics are we keeping in mind? From a policy point of view, legal, how do we now bake in all of these sustainability metrics in our contract? How do we make sure that we have the right elements in place? And you go into, I love Alaa's comment about creativity. How do we keep pushing our engineering department to come up with more sustainable solution from energy efficiency, from new kind of propulsion systems? Then we mentioned AI. How do we use data analytics to make sure that our solutions, I'll give you an example. We have an internal solution today that looks at the data of all of the movement of the train and start thinking about, what can be done, what messages can be sent to drivers for them to improve the way they're driving so that the machine itself improves in efficiency. How do we automate this? So I think it's a real spectrum, a broad spectrum, and also I would push a bit more and say, Kevin mentioned batteries. This is where what kind of innovation, what kind of new engineerings and then technologies that we want to push in that space to continue providing solutions that are much more efficient. So it's really a broad spectrum that you would argue every talent group within an organization, if they have that mindset, if they have that push, they will contribute in one way or another to achieve those goals.
Kevin, we talk about mindset, culture, sustainability, of course, crossing everything. We've spoken to sustainability teams here in the region. They keep them sometimes small because they don't want to take away from developing that culture mindset because it is integrated throughout everything. But from your perspective, what do you see as the next crucial steps in order to embed that culture and mindset and then also scale that up across
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we're looking at people from our perspective, we really look at both skill sets and culture. And when I say culture, we want people that are selfless, egoless, that are purpose-driven, that are looking to make an impact. And that's very important to us. From a skill sets perspective, I'd say all skill sets are welcome in the world of sustainability. There's a lot of work to do, whether it's finance, marketing, sales, engineering, of course, that goes without saying, as Alaa and Paul mentioned. But all of it is accessible. I mean, if you want to make a positive impact, this is one of the good fields that is definitely going to be growing. And how do you embed it in the organization? I mean, I think good activities around the theme of sustainability can always be fun. It can be fun to be sustainable too. So giving me ideas also, Brian.
It seems like 30 minutes goes by pretty fast on these podcasts, but I just wanted to get one quick soundbite again from around the room very quickly. Alaa, starting with you, we have COP28 coming up. What are you looking for as one key aspect coming out of COP28 in order to accelerate sustainable infrastructure and transportation?
Yeah, I think to conclude maybe where we started is, yes, we want this transition and we're all committed to champion it, and the entire world will be with us in the UAE to go into that journey together. But we have to ensure that this transition is just. It serves access to all, that sustainable mobility represents a safe, green.
Paul, I just want to also bring in you for your quick final thoughts. COP28, what are you looking at the top of your list to see develop?
So for COP28, I think it's a great opportunity that we have it in the UAE and in the broader region. What I would like to see is not just commitment but action. So really, we've mentioned a lot of decisions are made, but then implementation falls through. We've discussed a bit what is required for implementation. So I'd really like to see some real actions and for our region, for the Middle East in general, given that this is in our backyard, I'm hopeful that this will transpire to immediate action taken.
And Kevin, of course, action, acceleration. What are your final thoughts leading into
impact? I think it would be nice to really, there's a lot of things to say. Really, but to make it simple, we need to act now. There's a 40-year lag between cause and effect when it comes to climate change. So we won't have the same opportunity that we had with COVID to be reactive about things. We'll need to be proactive. And this is the opportunity we have at COP. We need to be proactive about our messaging. And we need to bring this to the same scale as COVID. If we're talking about global catastrophes, Pandemics are one, climate change is one. And we need to really be able to communicate on a daily basis. What are the emissions of every country? How are we reducing them? We need to be able to see that information on Google, as we did during COVID. Which sectors are transporting, and we need to create that accountability for every country. So I'm actually really excited to see what COP brings up, and I'm hoping that's actually going to be one of the positive outcomes.
Thanks for your comments. And just to wrap up, I'd like to bring our host back into the conversation as well to give his closing comments. Badar, we would like to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I'd like to thank all our guest speakers as well. I think they've comprehensively captured the entire essence of, what we are looking towards realizing, the transition and the sort of overall carbon reduction sort of objectives at the global scale, and in particular in the region. And as suggested, I think from our point of view, the most important consideration is going to be policy making and incentivized implementation. I will give you one example. In the US, if you buy the most popular EV that is there currently, there is a rebate that is offered upfront to every purchaser, right? That is what drives customer behavior, that drives a sort of a social pressure. It sort of leads into all sort of activities around that space, right? So financial institutions will be more geared up to support that sort of initiative. So the entire cycle starts to drive that way. So from a bank's perspective, one of the most, of course, critical sort of aspect is going to be policy making and its implementation.
Well, thank you very much, Badar, for your closing comments. And again, thank you to our special guest speakers, Paul, Kevin, Alaa. Thank you for your insights. For all those listening and watching, please feel free to follow them on social media as well for updates. And of course, follow Mashreq, where we will be posting this podcast, as well as content harvested from our discussion. But thank you very much, all of you, for joining today. We look forward again to having you on in the future.